Hello and welcome back to this channel. In this video, we will be covering how to use pivot table tool in an Excel document, which is a very powerful tool which can calculate, summarize, analyze your large data sets. It also helps you to do comparisons, look for patterns and look for trends in the data, which will help you analyze the numbers. There are different types of tools available which makes working with pivot tables much more fun. You can also add calculated fields in a pivot table without having to add in to your data set. Thereby, you can reduce the size of your data set. We will be covering most of the basic functions that will help you start preparing a pivot table. So before we jump on an Excel sheet, request you to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out any new videos. And if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. So without wasting much time, let's start learning pivot tables. For this exercise, I have a sample data which shows a employee-wise sales achieved divided into two separate teams and also a year-wise data. And as you can see, this is in a very raw data format. Standalone, this is not showing anything. I mean, you're not able to derive any sense out of this data because it's totally in a raw format. So pivot table helps us analyzing such data sets. For this example, you can see this is a very comparatively a very small data, but in real life scenarios, you can come across very large data sets having thousands of row lines. So let's see how you can manipulate this data in a pivot table and do your analysis. So for that, you need to select the range out of which you need to prepare the pivot table. So once you select your range, go to insert ribbon and the very first button that you will see would be pivot table. So once you click that, it will ask you that what is the range out of which you want to create the pivot table, so that it has automatically picked up, so that you can see it has already highlighted that for us. And where you want to place this pivot table. Now there are two ways. Either you can create a new worksheet or you can create the pivot table in the same worksheet over here. So you have to specify a place. So we will be covering that on a later stage. So let's go ahead with a new worksheet and click OK. So once you click OK, you can see it has created a new sheet for us. And this is a placeholder that it has placed over the Excel sheet where you can now drop your fields and create a pivot table. On the right hand side, this is called a field list panel. Over here, you can see all the field names. So you can see that this resembles to the column heading that you had over here. So sales team, year, employee name and sales achieved. These all get converted into a field name. So below that, you can put these individual fields in these categories. So either it can be a filter, you can put it in rows, columns, and any numerical value has to be put in the values section. So you cannot put any text field in a values section. So let's create a simple pivot table out of this. So for this, I'll bring the year into columns. You can just drag and drop them. So now you can see I had three different type of years coming over there: 2020, 2021 and 2022. So it is now listing it over here. Now let's bring in the sales team into rows. So you can see there were two sales teams, ST1 and ST2. Now let's bring in the employee name. So these are the employees who are in their respective teams, that is ST1 and ST2, and the sales achieved by them. So now you can see that it has organized the sales number that in the raw data according to year and employee and team wise. So this is how powerful pivot table is. So as you can see, it has now drawn up a trend for us. You can see like every year how much sales has been achieved, what is the total of that, also as an employee wise and at a team wise how much sales has been achieved, which was not possible going by this data, this form of data. So as you can see, by default pivot table shows the data in a new format, but you can toggle this view. Like you can see that the sections are above and their subsections are below. You can toggle this view by doing a right click and click pivot table options, and let's just for the time being toggle this on classic pivot table layout and click OK. So now you can see the layout has changed a little bit, and this is the old method of creating a pivot table. So here for every field it creates a new column rather than showing it in a single column, and depending upon how you want to work with the data and how comfortable you are, so you can toggle on and off between two layouts. Although in my experience we are using the old layout only, as it becomes very easy to work with this. So once this is done, you can also fill out these blank spaces in the sales team and employee name by going into design, going into report layout, and you can click repeat all item labels. So what it will do, it will fill out any blank cells in the rows field. So mind you, only in the rows field, not in these value fields. So let's take an example. Say if your value field would have been empty for some, then how could you could fill that out? So let's add a dummy data again in st2 for 2020, 2021, 2022, st2, and say this person's name is efgh, and we will not put in anything, we will keep it as 0. So I want to touch base on another thing. So say if you data has changed, the rows have increased. Now if you want to update this refresh, you can just right click it and click refresh, but it is not picking up that data. Now what to do? You can click pivot table analyze, click to change data source, and here it's again referring to the range on through which you had created the pivot table. But now we need to update this range. So your data is now coming till row 25, but the column remains the same. So what I'll do, either you can again drag and drop the whole table like this, or you could have just selected the portion you wanted to change and you could have done that over here and click OK. So now you can see automatically the data is refreshed and it has now taken this value. Now by default it is showing 0, but say it wouldn't have shown that this way. Say I delete this and there is no data coming over here and refresh this data again. Now you can see that all these cells are coming as blank. Now in this case what to do? So again right click over the table and go to pivot table options. Over here you'll see another option called empty cells as, and currently it is coming as a blank. You can just type in 0 over here and click OK. Now this will populate any blank fields in values as 0 or whatever value that you want to put over there. So now you have a pivot table ready in front of you. Now let's work with this table and see what else we can do. So one more topic that I want to touch on this is using the filters. Now it becomes very difficult to analyze or go through large data sets. Even for sometimes it becomes very difficult for pivot as well. So there what you can do, you can apply filters to pinpoint exactly what you want to see in the pivot table. In this example, let's say I want to filter my data sales team wise. So I can put the sales team field in the filters section and you can see it is now coming over here as a filter, and a drop down menu has come. So you can click this and you can filter the data by either say you want to see ST1 or you want to see ST2. If you keep both, it will merge the data. Now why it is not bifurcating it according to sales team? Because I had removed this field from the rows and I've put it into filters. So remember, if any field is there in the filters, it's not there in rows, it will not show it. It will merge all the data together. So again, if you want to bring that view in, you will have to drag and drop that over here like we were seeing. But this is not the only way of filtering a data. You can also apply a filter straight away from these drop down menus within the pivot table. So say for example, I want to see only 2022. So there is a drop down coming in front of this year. So you can click over here and again you are seeing those lists of years that we had in the data. So let me select 2022 and see it has now filtered that data. If you only want to see 2020 and 2022, that also you can do, or you can just click over here and it will filter that out for you. You can also do that for these rows fields as well. So in sales team, say if you want to see only ST1, you can directly put a filter over here, or you want to see ST2 again. But now you can see that it is not changing the layout. You can see that still you can see that team wise. So that's how you can use a pivot table and filter your data by either putting the field in filters or straight away you can filter it from here. The next thing that you can also do is go through these totals or subtotals. So for that, let's go to design, and here you will see some buttons called subtotals, grand totals. So let's just have a look what you can do with them. If you click don't show subtotals, it will not give you any subtotal. So subtotal means that a total of ST1 or ST2, it has switched that off. And if you want to see, show them, you can click show all and it will show these subtotals. This show all subtotals at top of the group will not work for this layout. It will work for the new layout where I was showing you earlier that everything comes up in a single column. So it will work over there. Now let's see what we can do with the grand totals. If you click off for rows and columns, it will remove the grand totals. If you click on for rows and columns, it will again bring that back in. So say if you want to show the grand totals only for the rows view, you can click on for rows only, so it is showing only these grand totals. If you want to show only for columns, you can keep it like this also. But by default, it will always remain as on for both the categories. Report layout, already we covered that if you want to repeat all the items, you can do that. If you don't want to repeat, just click don't repeat. You can also beautify your table by using these predefined templates. So this is, you can click like any format if you want to change. So you can see this is all changing. So by doing this also you can toggle the appearance of your table. Let's have a look at the field list. Right now it is showing you sum of sales. So by default, if there are any values, it will always give you sum of those sales. Say if you had items instead of numbers and you bring them to values, then it will consider it as count. Right now it is not considering it because these are all numbers. So say if you want to don't want to change this sum to something else. So say if you want to see an average sales. So for that, what you can do, right click over this field, go to field settings. Well, you can also go from the pivot table analyze. So if you click this and click field settings, it will come over here directly. Now say you can change this by to count, average, maximum, minimum, product, or other options. So for this example, let's have a look at the average, like what is my average sales, and click OK. So now this has changed to the average sales that it has achieved. You can also see what is the maximum sales that has been achieved. So this will go show you the maximum, and say if you want to show the minimum, you can also do that. Let's just keep it sum. Now say you want to make your pivot table a little bit more interactive. So interactive in a way you can toggle on and off any filters and may refine your pivot table. So for that there is a tool called insert slicer. So if you click anywhere in your pivot table and click insert slicer, it will ask you for what fields you want to put in a slicer. So slicers, you can say it is a type of a filter that will apply to your whole data set. So say I want to select a slicer for sales team, and I'll click OK. So that will bring in a set of buttons depending upon what unique values are there in that particular field. So for in this case, there were only two unique values called st1 and st2. So once it comes in, so you can place it anywhere according to your need or how you want to show the table or the display of the whole report, and you can click any one field to filter the data. So say I want to see only st1, so I'll click st1 and you can see that it has automatically applied the filter to this table. If you click st2, it is now showing only st2, and if you want to see the whole data, you can just click this button called clear filter and it will remove any filters. You can have multiple slicers. So let's again click the pivot table, go to pivot table analysis and again insert slicer. This time say I want a slicer for the year. I'll go ahead and select year and click OK. Again, just like the teams one, it has again inserted a slicer called year, and I'll place it over here. And you can see again I can individually select the year or period I want to see, and it will filter the data accordingly. I can again just clear this out over here. You can also change the appearance of a slicer. So say once you've selected a slicer, it will open a slicer ribbon. Over here you can see some defined formats for us, although not as much as there is in for a pivot table, but this will also do. So you can select any particular format. So say you want to select this format or this one, you can change it, but you'll have to do it individually, or if you select both of them and click, it will change it for you. You can also insert calculated fields in a pivot table. So you will need calculated fields to do some basic mathematical operations, not complex ones. And if you'll need them. Say you want to do some calculations which you do not want it to form part of your standard database because it will just increase its size. So how we can do that? So say in an example, we want to calculate the incentive to be given to each employee according to their sales achieved. So for that, there is a button called fields, items and sets. So if you click this, there are some options coming: calculated field and calculated item. So if your number is in columns, if you want a calculated column, that will become a calculated field, and if it is a calculated row, it will become a calculated item. So for this, because our data is on column wise data, so we'll create a calculated field, but the method of doing will be the same for both. So say I want to name this field as incentive, and how this will be calculated. I'll remove this 0 from this formula. I'll click sales achieved. We will insert this field and say the incentive will be 10% of the sales achieved, and we'll add this. So now you can see that it has added this incentive calculated field in this fields list, and if you click OK, it will calculate the incentive for us. So now if you want, you can remove the sum of sales from the table, and you can see only the incentive value coming in, and it has now calculated it for each and every year. But say if you want to remove this calculated field, then what you need to do, click fields again, go to calculated field, click this button, you'll see this coming over here as incentive, delete this and click OK. So now that has gone. Now because there is no values coming over here, that's why it is empty now. So let's bring in the sales achieved again. So that's how you can use calculated fields in a pivot table. Let's have a look at how you can create a pivot table in the same worksheet which I was talking about earlier. So let's create another pivot table. So for that we'll select our range over here, click insert and again click pivot table. Instead of selecting new worksheet, this time I'll click existing worksheet, and now it will ask for a table or range. So for this, click this button on the right hand side corner and select a place where you want to place this pivot table. So for this example, let's say I want to put it into J1. I'll select J1 and again click this button. It will bring up that option and click OK. Now you can see the placeholder for creating the pivot table has been placed in J1 cell, and just like what we were covering earlier, we can create a pivot table. So I'll bring in the sales team over here in rows, employee name, sales achieved, and year. So this way you can create the pivot table in the same worksheet where your data is also there. In this last section, we want to concentrate on, say you want to have a detail or you can want to access a detail behind any particular number in the pivot table. So say if you want to see that how this number is making up. So for that, one way is you go into sheet 1 and start filtering your data till the point you can identify that detail. Or the shortest way of doing that is you can just double click on any number and it will create that detail for you. So say for this example, I don't want to see the years. You have a data something like this. Now what you can do, just double click on the particular number and it will create another sheet for you where it will lay out all the details that is making up that number. So you can see in your pivot table, ABC had a total sales figure of this number, and how this is making up is by pulling up all the details regarding that ABC employee number. So this way you can also exactly pinpoint what is how your pivot number data is making up, and this is also useful when you are analyzing your numbers. So that's how you work with a pivot table, although it is very basic at the moment. But I would urge you to pick up some sample data and start playing with them. There is another concept called pivot charts, which I will cover when we'll be posting videos on various type of charts or graphs. But for the time being, I would urge you to get some sample data and start preparing any pivot tables from that. If you have any questions, please do write them in the comment section and we will pick them up. But happy learning. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something new today. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe our channel. It will mean us a lot, and we will keep posting new videos every week so that it can be beneficial to you. So once again, thank you very much, and do visit us again.